He was sliding into second base, and his right hand curled underneath him. He injured his right index finger.
Come again?
It forced him to come out of that game, and the hand really has not been right since then.
What?
So you're talking about 2 months of him playing through it.
So you're telling me our superstar, our all-star acquisition over the offseason that we're probably only going to have for one season has been hurt maybe for 2 months? Well, that's just fantastic. But hey, in this video for you, I'm going to break down two things. One, the obvious question, how has Kyle Tucker performed since that injury on June 1st? And number two, how has it impacted the team, specifically the top 4 guys in the lineup? So my goal is basically to see, is there a ripple effect because of Kyle Tucker's apparent injury that has affected the top of the lineup? And if there has, how can we get this fixed? So Cubs fans, I'm going to use this video as an opportunity to just basically ask really good questions. I want to hear from you. Please comment down below. I'm not an expert when it comes to this. I am looking to be able to find something that might tell a story, but at the end of the day, this is one of those questions that doesn't necessarily tell a clear-cut story because it's being backed by this theory of Kyle Tucker makes our entire lineup better. Then isn't it also a question of, well, if he's not playing well, maybe the rest of the lineup isn't playing well? So let me just go ahead and set the stage really quick, because if you remember back in April and May, Kyle Tucker was on fire. The offseason acquisition that you had to give up Cam Smith for was proving to be every bit of what we expected. 5 games in a row with a home run. You had the big game-winning home run against that wild game against the Diamondbacks in April, and he's elected to the NL All-Star team. So all these things combined are showing you Kyle Tucker is the guy. He's going to get $400, $500 million in the offseason, but when you started looking under the hood in these last couple months, there are a lot of concerns in what has been happening with Kyle Tucker and this guy who the year before had 23 home runs in only, I believe, 78 games. Now has 18 home runs, and it's been over 100 games already. And if we go even deeper on Kyle Tucker's stats, you can see by month, March and April, a 935 OPS with 7 home runs. In May, an 815 OPS, so he slumped a little bit in May, 5 home runs. June, the apparent finger injury month, actually his best, 982 and 5 home runs. So that actually would tell you no, that his finger was just fine, but is it possible that it was re-aggravated at some point or just maybe got worse along the way? Because July, 675 with just 1 stinking home run. And I think this is being magnified with the Brewers now taking first place and just seemingly taking over all of baseball, because even during this last 1 month plus since July 1st, the Cubs have been admirable, 16-11. That's pretty good, but they've just been passed up by the Brewers. So all of these little things are getting magnified. And even though they're 16-11 during that time, the pitching has kind of stepped up because the Cubs were scoring 5.4 runs per game before July 1st. Since July 1st, just 4.7 runs per game. And it's been even worse since the All-Star break. Look at these numbers. Kyle Tucker at 780 OPS with just 1 home run. Seiya Suzuki a 512 OPS with 1 home run. And Michael Busch a 523 OPS with 2 home runs. All these guys currently, their bottom line is in the 800s in the OPS, so you know that they're well underperforming. So I think the biggest question to ask is, what are Kyle Tucker's stats before June 1st, and what are they after June 1st? Let's take a look. 283 batting average, 391 on base, and a 520 slug with 12 home runs and 25 extra base hits leading up to June 1st. That's 58 games. Since June 1st, a 268 batting average, not that much of a drop-off, a 386 on base, very much in the same ballpark, but the big thing is nearly a 100-point difference in the slug. 520 before June 1st, 436 after June 1st. 6 home runs and 18 extra base hits in just about the same amount of games. That is a problem for a guy that's supposed to be carrying your offense. And as you can see, it really does have a direct correlation with the team. Before June 1st, the team had 5.8 runs being scored per game with an OPS of 782. After June 1st, 4.6 runs per game. That's a 1.2 run per game difference and a OPS of 746. So basically about 36-point difference in OPS. Sounds small, but it's pretty significant when you look at the overall theme here. But let's get even more specific. Let's not just talk about team. Let's talk about specific guys. If you were to look at this and say, well, who would Kyle Tucker have the most impact on? It's probably the guys batting right next to him. And I'm going to go even deeper and say the top 4 in the lineup. Michael Busch, Kyle Tucker, Seiya Suzuki, Pete Crow Armstrong. So let's ask the same questions. What did their stats look like before June 1st? What did they look like after June 1st? Seiya, it's a significant difference. 273, 335, 569 before June 1st with 14 home runs and 34 extra base hits. That's insane. Since June 1st, 223, so 50 points lower on the batting average, over 40 points lower on the on-base percentage, and over 120-point difference on the slug. 12 home runs and 20 extra base hits in basically the same amount of games, 54 games compared to 53. Now, we'll dive a little bit deeper into this in just a second, but we've all seen the effect that Kyle Tucker has had on this lineup. At least we have had this theory that, hey, Seiya Suzuki has this ceiling that we just haven't quite seen yet. And leading up to June 1st, we said, there it is. There's that guy that we've been waiting for, and it's because he finally has a guy that makes Seiya kind of the shadow. He gets to just kind of live in this shadow of Kyle Tucker and doesn't have to put so much pressure on himself to be the guy like he's been basically in the first 3 years of being a Cub, minus that 2-month stretch that Cody Bellinger had in 2023. So again, good questions here. The question is Seiya reverting back to that version where he's putting pressure on himself because he's known of Kyle Tucker's injuries, or was that stretch just in the beginning of the season leading up to June 1st just kind of out of the norm and a coincidence? Again, some of these questions I don't have the answers to. I would love to know your thoughts down below. And while you're at it, hit that like button. Now, what about Pete Crow Armstrong since June 1st? Well, he's been basically the exact same player. Slight dip, very, very slight dip, but nearly the same amount of games. And you're talking basically a 10 to 15 point difference in all of the batting average, on base, and slug numbers. 272, 306, 557 compared to 261, 300, 538 after June 1st. 15 home runs before June 1st, 12 after, 32 extra base hits before June 1st, 30 extra base hits after, and a 7-game difference between the two. 58 games before June 1st, 51 games since. Now, just about every game since June 1st, Pete Crow Armstrong has been about 2 batting spots behind Kyle Tucker, the occasional back-to-back, but that's not very often. I think that's important to note because, again, we're talking about direct correlation. If you're batting around Kyle Tucker directly either in front or behind him, is there an impact, and is there maybe a smaller ripple effect beyond that? And this would say, well, basically, there hasn't been any effect on Pete Crow Armstrong. Now, I think it is also important to examine Ian Happ's stats before June 1st and after as well, because a lot of the time he was in that leadoff spot. He hasn't exactly had a great season. He went on one really good stretch there. But outside of that, it really hasn't been all that great. But if we are going to say, hey, the guys around Kyle Tucker got impacted, then we need to look at his stats too, because he was still batting leadoff for a majority of those games. Pre-June 1st, 257, 348, 361. Slug, not great, but the rest of it pretty good from what we've come to know from Ian Happ. But since June 1, a 196 batting average, 295 on base. When was the last time you saw Ian Happ go through a stretch of under 300 on the on-base percentage for an extended time? The slug went up, 418, 12 home runs during that time, 19 extra base hits. But once again, is it possible that Ian Happ just said, hey, I got to put more pressure on myself. I got to hit more home runs because I know Kyle Tucker behind me might not have that strength in that finger. Now, Michael Busch, because this one is an interesting case. You look at just the underlying before June 1st, after June 1st, and you say, well, it's actually helped him. But stick around because we're going to look deeper under the hood, and it's going to make a difference in how you view this. Before June 1st, Michael Busch in 54 games, 257 average, 353 on base, 463 slug, great numbers. 7 home runs, 20 extra base hits. Since June 1st, he went off. 51 games, 282 average, 362 on base, and a 554 slug for 14 home runs and 19 extra base hits. He doubled the amount of home runs in basically the same number of games during that time from after June 1st. However, this is the important thing. Since joining the leadoff spot, batting in front of Kyle Tucker, it has been miserable. A 158 average, a 250 on base, and a 316 slug for a combined 3 home runs, and those are his only extra base hits during that time. Now, you could say, hey, well, that just means Michael Busch isn't a great leadoff hitter, and you might be right. It's tough to lead off. Look at all of the guys this year. Ian Happ, Michael Busch, Pete Crow Armstrong, and Nico Horner. Only Pete Crow Armstrong has actually flourished in the leadoff spot. Wait around at the end until I talk to you more about that. But when we look at that, we might just say, well, Michael Busch just isn't a leadoff hitter. And I probably would agree, but given the fact that the Cubs just had a really tough time with Ian Happ this year, he's kind of forced in that position. But again, the question becomes, is it because he's at the leadoff position, or is it because he's batting in front of Kyle Tucker, knowing that Kyle Tucker has an injury and putting more pressure on himself? And this is where I feel comfortable living in the spot here, because if you remember the 2023 and the 2024 Cubs, there were these stretches that guys in clumps would not be able to perform. It was Ian Happ, it was Dansby Swanson, it was Seiya Suzuki, it was Michael Busch, it was Nico Horner, it was everyone was in a slump. And as soon as one guy got out, then the rest of them got out. I think this is something that cannot be put to the side. I know that, there's going to be people, there's going to be experts that will say, well, it's just a small sample size, you're looking too much into it, the mental side isn't as big. I disagree. I think the mental side is huge when it comes to this. And if you know that your guy that has been carrying this offense and helping you score 6+ runs per game leading up to June 1st, close to it, 5.8 runs per game. If that guy hurts his hand and you're seeing him getting taped up by the trainer or getting worked on by the trainer and you're batting around him, now I need to kind of step it up for him because he did for me. But if you're not a superstar and you try to play like a superstar, you're typically going to go into a funk. Remember Cody Bellinger last year in 2024? He said, admittedly, I'm trying to slug the ball. I'm trying too hard to hit home runs. And he was in a terrible slump for most of the season until he finally just relaxed and let it go. Still never became the 2023 Cody Bellinger that we really wanted to extend, but at the same time, it was still better once he just relaxed. Now, let me throw a wrench, a curveball in this whole situation, because there was one other thing that happened close to June 1st. About 10 days before June 1st, PCA started hitting fourth. So there's other theories around that could also support that maybe PCA's move in the lineup, along with Michael Busch's move in the lineup at that time, could be the reason for a difference in all the stats that we're seeing. Number one, PCA actually stayed about the same, whereas he was batting 7th, 8th, 9th, sometimes 5th or 6th. He basically became that number 4 hitter, and his numbers have pretty much stayed the same since that May 20th, right around there when he was moved there. Michael Busch was moved from the 4th spot down to number 5, 6, sometimes even 7 or 8 if you're facing a lefty, and since then his numbers have taken off. Maybe it's just that Michael Busch doesn't perform all that well in higher leverage situations in the top of the lineup compared to the bottom of the lineup. Number 4 spot, he's got about an 840 OPS this year, which is about on par for where he's at. But number 1, again, you've seen the numbers. It's not good since he was at the leadoff spot. The rest of the order, 5th, 6th, he thrives in. A 999 OPS in the 5th spot and a 1,054 in the 6th spot. Meanwhile, as you know, Seiya started to struggle after that. Now, he's going to have his ups and downs. He's always been that kind of player. One day he goes 3 for 4 with 2 home runs. The next day he goes 0 for 4 with 3 strikeouts. Now, this could be twofold for Seiya. Is it possible he's putting too much pressure on himself because he's batting behind Kyle Tucker? He sees Kyle Tucker walk. He sees Kyle Tucker maybe get on base via a single. The extra base hits just haven't been there, so he thinks he has to add more slug, thus putting himself into more slumps. Or could it also be that the opponents know that Pete Crow Armstrong is going to chase so much that they just don't have to attack Seiya like they usually have in the past? Now, Pete having, aside from, maybe a couple slumps this year, has really been the MVP of not only the Cubs, but you could argue the National League. It's possible that they still think they can get him out because he chases so much. That's the theory that I'm putting in here, is that not because he's not producing, but because he chases so much, teams might think, well, we don't have to lay it in there to Seiya because we know that if we throw 3 sliders in the dirt, Pete's going to swing. If he beats us, he beats us. But if he doesn't, it's because we knew that he wasn't going to take many pitches. So let's summarize all this. Basically, there's no real evidence based on the numbers and based on the fact that Kyle Tucker's been in the lineup almost every single day outside of fouling a ball off his knee, that the finger has been that much of an issue. He's just had a really bad month of July and a few games into August. Seiya Suzuki has struggled mightily since June 1st if you actually look at the numbers under the hood. Meanwhile, Pete Crow Armstrong has been steadily amazing all year long, and Michael Busch after June 1st has been incredible as well, but in the leadoff spot, not so much. And overall, since June 1st, the Cubs are scoring over a run less per game. So assuming that Boog was right when he said on that broadcast on Saturday that Kyle Tucker may be dealing with a finger injury, and that is really impacting the way that he swings the bat, let's go ahead and come up with a solution right now. There's 51 games left. Give Kyle Tucker 5 games off. Give him 6, 7 games off, even if you have to. I would rather have 100% healthy Kyle Tucker for the last 45 games of the year rather than 80% Kyle Tucker for the last 51 games of the year. And in the meantime, Carson Kelly has been lighting the world on fire since June 21st, a 954 OPS. Put him in the top 4 of the order just to get through those 5 or 6 games. But when he comes back, put Kyle Tucker back at number 2, keep Seiya at number 3, and I want you to flip-flop PCA and Michael Busch. Why? Because number one, Michael Busch is not a leadoff hitter, and he does not have the numbers for a leadoff hitter in 16 games. That's enough of a sample size for us in a win-now mode to say stop. And PCA, in a very small sample size, was absolutely eye-popping phenomenal at the leadoff spot. In 8 games, he had a .353 average, a .361 on base, and a .765 slug. Not sustainable the rest of the year, but anyone is better than anyone that has led off so far this year. A lot of you might say Nico Hoerner, and that's fine. I'd be fine with that too, but a .240 batting average and right around a .320 on base percentage is the numbers that Nico has put up this year at the leadoff spot. That's not all that great. The upside of moving Michael Busch from first to fourth is really the big play here, because you take a guy who kind of looks like Justin Turner right now from the leadoff spot, and you put him into a spot where he's more comfortable with an .841 OPS this year at the number 4 hole, and you basically have the Michael Busch that you expect right there producing every day and driving in runs. And if Carson Kelly continues to hit, then guess what? You move Michael Busch down to that number 5 or number 6 spot where he's hitting at least a .999 OPS this year, and move Carson Kelly to number 4. And he's been just fine there as well at an .809 OPS. We have no idea what really is going on. All we can do is look at the numbers. All we can do is listen to what they say on the broadcast. And all we can do is see that Kyle Tucker is not playing like the superstar that we expected him to be for pretty much the last 30 plus games. Something has to change if this team wants to win the World Series, if they even want to make it to the playoffs, for God's sake, here in 2025. What do you think about my solution? Let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you're liking, subscribing, doing everything. I'm going to go put my arm on ice.